Welcome to Passionate World Talk Radio. Educate, enlighten, entertain. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the Writer's Stop, the show where writers from all walks of life drop by to talk about writing in all its forms. We have authors who'll chat about their own books, the joys of traditional versus self-publishing, and perhaps even answer the eternal questions. What exactly should you put in a query letter? And how do you write a synopsis? They will help you to avoid any pitfalls so that you can learn from their mistakes. I'm your host for the next hour, Elizabeth James, and I look forward to hearing more about your journey into the publishing world. Do you have a toehold in your chosen market? What type of books do you write? Are you struggling to find a home for your magnus opus? Stay tuned to find the answers to your many questions over the coming weeks and months. We have competitions, giveaways, and many other opportunities for you to stretch your writing muscles. Don't let them go to waste. Use them or lose them. Don't let a lack of confidence hold you back. Join in and you may surprise yourself with what you can achieve. We have a lot of exciting events planned in the coming weeks and months, plus one very exciting venture which will require audience participation. More on that in a later show. We will also have agents and publishers dropping by to talk about what they are currently looking for and, more importantly, how to submit to them. Okay, welcome to the Writer's Stop, guys. My name is Elizabeth James and I'm your host for the next hour. I'm very excited to say that my third guest is joining me today. She's written a wonderful book called Beautiful, Frighting and Silent. It's a very strange book for me because when you do this job, you need to read all the books that are given to you, and some of them are, shall I say, out of your comfort zone. This was one of them. But I have to say, I'm so glad that I trusted Jennifer when she told me it wasn't scary. This is a gothic horror, which is new for me, and I was a little bit worried in case I was frightened by it, but I was pleasantly surprised. Now, I just want to check, Jennifer, are you writing this as Jennifer Ann Gordon?
I write under Jennifer Ann Gordon because there's lots of Jennifer Gordons.
I see. I'll get you, if you will, to tell the listeners a little bit about the book so that they know what we're talking about. I've read it, they haven't. Can you give us a quick synopsis of the book? Tell us so that we know what it's about.
I can try. So, Beautiful, Frighting and Silent, which is my debut novel, is, as Elizabeth said, a gothic horror novel that deals with grief and the reawakening of childhood traumas when dealing with tragedy. So it is not just a ghost story, but it is a story about a man who has lost everything, his wife and his young son, in a terrible car accident. And the story is his journey as he tries to forgive himself and tries to find forgiveness, perhaps in the spirit of his young son. So my main character, Adam, has heard a rumor of a haunted island off the coast of Maine, and he travels there in order to reconnect with the spirit of his young son. And while he's there, he gets involved with a very beautiful but manipulative female ghost and the elderly man who murdered her 60 years before. So it's a horror novel, but I think it goes beyond horror to deal with trauma and sadness and poetry and love and fear and rage and regret.
I was going to say it's a very emotional and emotive novel. And I think you've handled the issues so well. Would you say it was more of a psychological horror then?
People keep asking, is it psychological horror? Is it gothic horror? It's definitely both, because it deals very, very much with psychological issues, like I said, past trauma, the losing touch with reality. It deals with addiction and the slow descent into madness. All of that is very much akin to a psychological horror novel. But in the same vein, Gothic horror novels have a lot of, I hate to use the word tropes, but they have a lot of tropes. The woman in white, the crumbling old mansion, the dark and stormy nights. And the other thing with Gothic horror is there's always a lot of symbolism and something called doubling, where characters sort of mirror each other in the past and in the present. So I think the book captures that. It captures traditional Gothic storytelling, but takes it to a different and maybe new level by adding the psychological aspects to it. And also my writing style is very poetic. So it also kind of combines free verse poetry in there too.
It's funny that you should say that, about the poetry, because one thing I've said, I pick it up on the review, is that your wording is very lyrical. You're almost like a composer or a producer. What's the word? Conductor, who is building the wave. And sometimes the waves that go out of the sea, then they'll come back with more force. Sometimes it's gentle, sometimes it's forceful. Is that something that you did that deliberately, or was it?
Yes, I'll take credit for that. Yes, I did do that deliberately. As you know, because you've read the book, and I don't want to give too many spoilers away for people who haven't. For the majority of the novel, my female character, my ghost, speaks in poetry, and as opposed to traditional narrative prose. And a lot of the early work that I did for her as a character was taken directly from the poetry that I had written. So I never really thought of it as prose. I always thought of it as she had a more musical quality, a more tangential, ephemeral grasp on time and space. So she communicated in a different way. So the way she communicates and the way her narrative is musical. It is rhythmic. She repeats phrases over and over again, and she is symbolically the same thing over and over again because she died so many years ago. So she's, if you believe in the paranormal, which I do, she's in many ways caught in a cycle.
Yes.
So when she speaks, she is kind of cyclical in nature, her repetitiveness. But I like what you said about the waves building, because her intentions build throughout the novel until, again, I can't really say, but her intentions and her energy build throughout the entire novel until something happens.
Yeah. It's a very exciting novel. As I say, I would have said, if you said to me, would you read this as Gothic horror? I would have said no. Because it's not something that I particularly want to do is be scared. But your book is beautiful. It's not terrifying.
No.
And it is kind of silent it's a very subtle fear, if that makes any sense. I'm trying to explain it, but I'm not doing very well.
It does make sense what you're saying, because in the early stages of this book, when I had people who were reading it before it was published, I got a few notes from people that said, I wish there was more dialogue. I wish the characters were more active. Yeah. But that's not who these characters were. So that is the silent part of it. Yeah. It's a very internal book. The characters are three incredibly lonely beings, and they are in their own heads so much of the time that when they do finally have a chance to communicate with somebody else, whether it be a spirit or another person, they almost don't know how to communicate, because they have been so silent for so long, so repressed.
Yeah, there was one part that I was saying, please let this spirit be, and another part of it was so sad. It was so all I can say is it's beautifully written. I don't want to sound like I'm repeating myself. Some of this are going to be taken out, obviously. Jennifer, would you?
Oh, you should keep all the compliments in.
I will. Don't worry. It's just where I talk over you in particular. I'm trying to avoid doing that this time. But yeah, would you do me a favour? Would you read about 5 minutes of your novel for me? Would you? So that it doesn't matter which part, just to whet the listeners' appetites.
Okay, I definitely will do that. I'll actually read from the very beginning of the novel, and this is from the ghost's point of view, so this way your listeners can kind of understand what you and I were talking about with her verbiage being more poetic than traditional. She walks slowly to his bed, leaving a trail of wet footprints in her stead. She is a ghost ship, silently making its way across the sea of his room. She looks at his sleeping form. He's curled in on himself. When he was younger and stronger, he would sleep like a warrior. He was so proud he would dominate everything. His bed, his dreams, even sleep itself would bow down under his perceived strength. He is so much older now. These days he sleeps like a child, or a cat, both starving but petrified of the mouse. She hears the rattling of death climbing out from the deepest parts of his lungs each time he exhales. It was the little things, like these moments, she supposed, that she grew to love. They were her favorite part of all of this, her favorite part of this very long, endless day. This existence, it's not a life, but it's not death. She's in the in-between. She's in the empty. She climbs into his bed and into his world. She lies next to him. Her body is damp and seemingly heavy. Her wet hair and wet face and waterlogged body creep into his dreams. She is a memory revitalized, a nightmarish creature, a visitor come back to stay. She stares at him intently. She's focused. You would think, after 60 years, she would have grown tired of his face, of this, her nightly ritual. But she hasn't, and she expects she never will. She stares until she feels something building in her throat. It's her anger. It's her fear. It's her rage. It feels like fire, and it burns inside of her. It aches to get out. He opens his eyes, with the confusion of age, alcohol, and too many dreams. Before thinking better of it, his arm reaches across the bed. It reaches for her memory. He finds the other side of the bed empty, but damp. She doesn't let him touch her, not for many years. In the morning, his sheets will smell like the ocean. At least her side of the bed will. It will have the aching scent of brine, salt, and wet. So different from the way his side smells, of tears, whiskey, and the sour sweat of fear. He gets up, ignores the wet footprints she leaves on the floor, the ones that lead to his bed, the ones that circle him while he sleeps. He plods to the bathroom, washes his face, rinses the staleness out of his mouth. He thinks for a moment he can see her out of the corner of his eye. She'll always look the same, with her soaked hair, white dress, her head down.
Can I just get you to redo that bit? Sorry, that last sentence. Go back 2 sentences, because it sounded like a truck went past you.
Oh, yes, the truck did go past me. Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I think I hear a motorcycle was going by.
That's what I could hear.
Yeah, we live on this road that's kind of a main road to get to the lakes region. So on the weekends, sometimes it gets very loud with motorcycles. But I will go back to, he gets up, ignores the wet footprints she leaves on the floor, the ones that lead to his bed, the ones that circle him while he sleeps. He plods to the bathroom, washes his face, rinses the staleness out of his mouth. He thinks for a moment he sees her out of the corner of his eye. She will always look the same with her soaked hair, white dress, her head down. No, she doesn't let him look at her face, not directly. His breath catches in his throat. He makes a sound somewhere between a cough and a scream. He should be used to this by now. Used to her. The simple fact that she can still surprise him like this is what keeps all of this from becoming commonplace. We've got a saw outside. He thinks he picks up on the sound of her laugh, the way it would ring like silver in his ears, but he is mistaken. She loves him. No, that's not quite right. She loved him. She tries to remember a time before she felt those things. This task of hers is more difficult than one would expect. The simplicity of trying to remember when she existed before they met, before she wandered into his life. This is a burden she's not yet managed to bear. Was there a time before they collided and destroyed each other's worlds? She hates him. She never hated him while she was alive. She should have. She knows that. He deserved her hate. She does hate him now. She knows this is both the beginning and an ending. Hate can be powerful, but not as powerful as fear. She fears him now, and she feared him then. There are ghosts and memories in this house that even she fears. But this man, he only fears her, and that's what keeps her here. She opens her mouth and she invites the rage that burns in her throat to finally have a voice. It feels like fire waiting to be born. She feels it rushing out of her. It's a scream that has taken 60 years to finally be birthed. She opens her mouth, and all there is salt water.
I thought you read that lovely. Thank you very much for reading that.
Thank you.
No, I really enjoyed it. We're going to go for a quick station identification. Then when we come back, we'll talk more about Jennifer's writing process. So I'm just going to leave it a few seconds so that I know where to put the station identification in. Lydian will kill me if I don't put those in. Poor woman going through it all that, you don't beg people.
Yeah.
What she said, I'll tell you when we finish this, because you don't want to be drinking, I'll tell you, won't you? I'll take you a quick swig. This woman is brilliant, but oh my God, she's like the character. So, welcome back to, hey, I did say Elizabeth James at the beginning, didn't I?
You did.
Thank goodness. Oh, this is happening a lot at the moment. What I've done, at the base of your at the base of your brain, there's something called your basal ganglia. It's the size of a walnut, and you split it, and it's split in half, and I fell. And it affects my memory and my balance and my eyes.
Okay.
So it's that's why if things go wrong, you'll get why. Okay, welcome back to the Writer Stuff, and my name is Elizabeth James. I'm with you for the next 45 minutes or so, and my third guest in this series is the wonderful, the delightful Jennifer Ann Gordon, who is here to talk to us today about her book, Beautiful, Frightening and Silent. I think I've made it quite clear how I feel about this book now, so we'll talk more about her writing process. Jennifer, how did you come up with the idea for the story?
Well, so this novel, Beautiful, Frightening and Silent, actually started percolating in my brain about 20 years ago when sorry, there's a saw outside. The idea started about 20 years ago. I was going to school for acting at the time, and I thought about writing a play, a 3-person play. And that's when these characters first started to develop in my head. But I realized shortly after I tried to write it that it wouldn't work, because there was no way for me to get my ghost, my beautiful, terrifying ghost, to be as interesting as she could be on a stage with no budget. So that was when the story first started to take root in my head. And at the time, I thought it was very, very much a story of the ghost and the man who murdered her. And my the person who's a main character in my book, Adam, he was there, but really just to move the story along. So he developed over time. I think the next time I tried to go write this story, I thought it would be a good graphic novel or a comic book series, but so I storyboarded a lot of it out, but I never could find the right artist to work with on the project. So again, it just sort of stayed on a shelf in the back of my imagination. And about a year ago now, I decided I'm going to write a novel, and I sat down and I tried to write the novel that I actually have coming out this Thursday, a book called From Daylight to Madness. And I was so bogged down with the research of that and the emotional aspects of this book, From Daylight to Madness, that I got, kind of writer's block. So I decided, just as an exercise, I'm going to just sit down and maybe I'll write a short story. And it turned into Beautiful, Frighting, and Silent. It turned into a novel. And it just, the second I wrote the first paragraph of Adam, I saw him and knew him as a character so well that I just wanted to tell his story so badly that it really, the novel itself kind of poured out of me in less than 2 months.
Wow.
Maybe so. I wrote every day. I wrote fast. The first draft, I should say, took about 2 months.
Yeah. I will come back to that in just a moment, but you just raised a couple of very interesting thoughts. I'll put it that way, and I'll re-record that bit. But yeah, when you said you knew the characters and all that, did you ever? I've just been having this discussion with somebody. Do you ever feel and see the character like they're real people? Because what I found with your film, I'm going to say film there, what I found with your book, I could see them and I wondered if to you they were real.
Yes, so real. So, especially, all three of them, the ghost, Adam, and Anthony, I really felt them and I could see them. I could almost, I could smell them. I could hear the way they walked. And Adam, I knew him so well, but he would still surprise me. Like when I was writing about him, it's almost like he has a life of his own, and he would do something, and my fiance would be in the other room, and he could hear me screaming at my computer, "That was the wrong choice. That's really bad for you." But yeah, they are real. And when I finished writing this book, I missed them a lot.
Yeah.
I especially missed Adam. I keep telling people he broke my heart a little bit.
Yes.
He breaks everybody's heart who reads the book, but
you broke my heart probably for. I think what I love about this character, the reason that he breaks people's heart, everyone identifies with him on a different level.
Yeah. And I think I've had a few people say how much they hated him. But those people were few and far between so far. Yeah. He isn't, he's not, as a main character, Adam's not easy to like. He has a drinking problem. He has trust issues. He is closed off. He can hardly help himself. So he's not likable, but there's something so human about him.
Yes.
That he's lovable.
Yeah.
Like you can't help but, feel for this man who is very much drowning in his own grief. Yeah. And he can't get past it because as a character, when he was a little boy, he wasn't loved and he wasn't taught how to love. Yeah. So he has no skill set in his mentality to get him past his own grief.
Yes, yes.
And I think that's the people relate to that.
Yes.
We've all lost someone or something that was so profound that we didn't think we could get over it.
Yes, I can certainly identify with that. The other question, you're throwing questions at me that I wasn't intending to ask, but never mind. Go with the flow. You mentioned writer's block. You did this as an experiment for writer's block. I must remember the other question. But what do you say to people who have writer's block then? Do you have any advice for them?
At that time, when I shouldn't even really use the word writer's block, but I was feeling that I wasn't up to the task of writing the book that I thought I was going to write. So I wrote something else. So I think if people sit down at their computer or their typewriter or their notebook and they have quote unquote writer's block, I don't really believe it. I believe maybe there's something emotionally inside of you that's stopping you from writing what you think you're supposed to be writing. So I would say write something else, even if it's just for a little while, even if it's a poem, even if it's a haiku, even if it's a sentence. The writers always have something to write about.
Absolutely.
There's no, I don't believe in like the typical writer's block where people say like, I haven't been able to write in 6 months, not a word. Well, I don't believe that, because you could always pick up a journal and write what happened in your day. So when people say they have writer's block, I say, then you're trying to write the wrong thing.
Yes.
Find what you're supposed to be writing and write it.
It's funny
because once I wrote Beautiful, Frighting, and Silent, I went back and wrote From Daylight to Madness, the book that I thought I was going to write first. And it was so much easier, because I was ready for it.
Yes, maybe you had to write the other one first.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you did, because we'll be having a different conversation. I am so excited that your next book is out. Now, this also takes place on Dagger Island. I know I'm going to have you as a returning guest to talk about this. That's as long as you're willing to do it, you're a welcome guest.
I am.
This interview is flying by. We're almost halfway through. How does it get that fast? Anyway, I've completely forgot what I knew this was going to happen.
We were Dagger Island.
Yeah, thank you. Was Dagger Island, are they actually a set of a series of books, or are they sort of books that you can read that happen to be set in the same place, but they're not part of a series? Does that make sense?
So it does make sense. So Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent, the book we're discussing here today, is a standalone. It exists. It takes place on Dagger Island. The book that's coming out this week, From Daylight to Madness, that is part of a 2-book series, and those 2 books will have to be read together. So From Daylight to Madness, and then the second part of it will be out this fall, and that is called When the Sleeping Dead Still Talk. Those 2 books are a series. And so, and again, the Dagger Island is a fictitious place that I'm strangely fascinated by, this idea, this world that I've sort of created. So I have a lot of books that I want to set there, but they're not necessarily connected. If you read all my books, you'll see that there are little Easter eggs dropped in all of them that do sort of connect them, but only symbolically.
Yes. Yeah.
You won't need, if you read Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent, and then read From Daylight to Madness, you'll see a couple little hints at things. But if you haven't read Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent, it doesn't take anything away from my new book.
Oh, I'm glad about that, because had I not read that, I didn't want to end up in a mess.
Yeah.
As I have. It makes no odds. Anyway. Sorry, just checking the time, whether we go for another station identification yet. We've got a couple of minutes. When you, just give me a second, sorry. What is your
You're
writing?
okay.
What is your writing kryptonite?
Oh, gosh.
Told you get some strange questions.
Yeah. All right. My greatest weakness. I would say, it's going to sound, oh gosh. I always think writing romance would be my greatest weakness. Like, and I'm not saying I can't write a love story because I am a hopeless romantic. And I think there's a deep love story that goes through most of my writing. But I think I would have a very, very hard time writing a happily ever after romance in a traditional way. And I also think, and this is probably just because I was raised Catholic in New England, I would have a very hard time writing a sex scene. I think I would be like a graphic sex scene. I would be so embarrassed.
That's one of the things I really try that again. That's one of the things I really liked about it, that there was no graphic sex scenes in there. I mean, I just had a conversation with someone who said I was a prude. I just feel that certain things just need to be left behind the door because we know exactly what happens. We don't need to have an instruction manual.
I mean, I would never tell somebody how to write, and I know a lot of people really like reading things like that. And I think there's a time and a place. Like I like certain kinds of erotica. I like Anais Nin a lot, but again, I think of her more as a sensual memoirist.
Yeah.
But to me, me as a writer, not even as a reader, but I don't think I would be able to write a believable sex scene. And I'm not a prude. I've danced burlesque. I've been a performer my whole life, but I feel like I wouldn't even know where to start writing it. Like I wouldn't know what words I'm supposed to use, and it would probably just come off as really awkward. If I had to, I couldn't do it. So I think that would be, and that's probably what keeps me away from writing romance, because I feel like eventually I would have to write a sex scene.
Yes,
and
exactly.
It would be embarrassing.
Yeah, I mean, I've written
for me.
Yeah, I've actually written a few books for adults as opposed to adult books, if you see the drift. And I certainly know E.L. James, that's for sure. But
oh gosh,
I said I'm no E.L. James, by the way, and I personally don't feel the need to put a sex scene in there. There is one sex scene in a book, and it is very uncomfortable. It was very uncomfortable for me to write, but it was uncomfortable for the character as well. So I felt it was important to put it in there. It was hard to read when I read it back. But the book that I've written for you, well, I've written the book, but you know what I mean, that I want to send you, that has got no sex scenes in that I can remember. So I'm glad about that.
See, I don't have a problem necessarily reading them at all. And like I said, I'm not a prude, but it is something I think would be a weakness for me as an author.
Yeah.
And I think I could write a scene that was intimate emotionally.
Yes.
A lot easier than writing something that was supposed to be sexy.
Yes.
And if it, again, I'm, and this is probably because I went to school for theater, and so much of my schooling was, as a performer, was developing characters and character development. I could be wrong. Maybe like 6 months from now, I'll be writing a book and it'll feel right for the character to have a sex scene. But right now, I feel like most of the characters I write are too sad or too dead to have a sex scene.
Sorry, what? I know. I hate it when that happens. How did publishing your first book change your writing process?
I think it slowed down my writing process in some ways because
that
uh,
noise.
that's okay. That was a big motorcycle that went by. I think in some ways it slowed down my writing process because my focus has been split between publicizing and promoting Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent, and writing and living in a new world creatively with From Daylight to Madness. So whereas Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent, my focus wasn't split. My few hours a day that I had to write, I spent writing. Now, the time I have during the day that's for writing is part of that time is also spent promoting Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent, and also doing graphic design and making teaser graphics and networking and doing interviews. So in some ways it slowed the creative process down. But I would say having a book published and out there and selling and doing well with critics also has given me the confidence to keep writing. Especially writing in the style that I write, because it's not traditional and it's not super commercial. Because it's so poetic and it's so lyrical that there's not a lot of books out there that are written like that. So I didn't know if I could find an audience, but I have. So that's given me confidence to keep writing.
We're going to have to go through a quick station identification, but when we come back, we'll talk more to Jennifer Ann Gordon about her lovely book, Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent. I might have to re-record that. The sound was very low. Just give me a few seconds. Welcome back to the Writer's Talk. My name is Elizabeth James, and I'm with you for the next half hour. I'm having a fantastic time chatting to my third guest this week, and that is Jennifer Ann Gordon. We've been chatting about the writing process and her book, Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent. Jennifer, thank you for staying. I know we've had a lot of technical problems actually getting this interview done, so I'm so grateful to you for staying by me.
That's okay. I will say, as somebody who is also a podcast host, I understand the technical issues, and as somebody who's been on a lot of podcasts and radio shows, a few of the ones that I've been on have had a lot of technical issues, and we've had to go back and re-record. And those are some of my very favorite interviews I've done, whether they were interviews I've given or interviews that, I was the guest. So everything happens for a reason.
It certainly does. Well, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad I've got you today. You are literally feeding me the questions, and sometimes you're actually anticipating what I'm going to ask you, which is quite strange.
Oh, well, I'm a little psychic.
Yeah. Well, that's a conversation we'll have off air, but I know that. Sorry. My throat's gone a bit sore. I should take a quick sip. Oh. Not very helpful to do an interview. Joking. Before the break, before the station identification, we were talking about what were we talking about?
We were talking about sex. No, but and then after, I know we were talking about little sex scenes, but we were really talking about how publishing, how that's changed my writing process.
Right, thank you. I'm so sorry. I'm so embarrassed, but can't do.
No, you don't be. Even I was just like, what were we talking about before?
Okay, that's a funny outtake. I might put these together in a bloopers file, if there's one in every interview. I'll tell you a funny one before we go back to the interview. My first guest, Simon, I've just done it. His name was Jeremy. No. The hell was his name? Stephen. And I called him everything but that. And then he said at the end, why didn't you call me Jeremy? Stephen, and I'm like, oh my God, it's so embarrassing. Anyway, that was even worse then. Okay, so going back to the more serious stuff, which is promoting your books, I wanted to ask you, I just saw the question. Damn it. Ooh. I wanted to ask you something earlier. I'm sorry, I should have written this question down. Have you ever got reader's block? So you.
Reader's block.
Yeah. As a writer, have you ever had reader's block?
So do you mean in the sense of like I can't even read my own words, or that I just don't feel like reading anyone's words?
Don't feel like reading anyone's, even your own.
Oh, I have. And sometimes I call that, I've never called it reader's block. I've called it like a reading hangover or a book hangover. And that usually happens if I've read a book that's kind of emotionally destroyed me, or just something that's really, really affected me emotionally, and I'm not ready to give that up yet. I'm not ready to. So, and I almost feel like I can't read anything else after that for a little while. There's two books in particular that I had to take almost a month off of reading after reading each of these. One of them was In the Woods by Tana French. Because she wrote a main character in that book. His name is Rob, who broke my heart so completely.
Can you just repeat that? Because probably from the name of the book, because the sound.
Okay. So Tana French's In the Woods gave me this kind of book hangover because her main character in that book is named Rob, and he broke my heart completely. And it was an amazing book, a wonderful mystery, a great like police drama. But mainly it was him as a character. He was such a perfectly written character that I didn't want to read anything else after that because I just wanted him to live in my brain. Yeah. And the other book that gave me kind of a reader's block, if you will, would be Peter Heller's The Dog Stars, which is a post-apocalyptic book, but it's so much more than that. It's about a virus that ends the world and about the few people who are left, but it's another book that's written in poetry more than prose. Yeah. And that book is so beautiful and so heartbreaking, and it's about finding life again when everything around you has been destroyed. So those two books in particular have given me reader's block. Yeah. Because I didn't want to let them go.
Yeah. I felt like that about your book, to be honest. I didn't want to let your book go.
Wow. That gives me chills.
When I read your book, I mean, as we've said, it's a very sad book. Do you feel that if you write, you have to get the emotions that the character has to get, so that they read that same emotion from the book, or so that the readers, sorry, I re-recalled that question, so, or do you feel that you can write it without having any emotion inside of it?
No, I need to feel it.
Yeah.
I do need to feel it. That's why I know a lot of people, I know a lot of writers who they're like, oh, I've got 10 minutes. I'm just going to type out a few quick paragraphs, or they can write while doing other things. They can write when they're on a bus or on a train or on their break at work. And I feel like my brain, I need quiet, and I need to kind of like really get into character before I even start typing. And the most, like when I'm really in it, and I'm writing, I actually say the words out loud too. So whether my character has an accent or anything, I speak the words as I'm typing them. That's sometimes I know like where the rhythm of the sentence will, if it works or if it doesn't work, or if I lose the poetry of the language. Yeah. I know it right away because when I'm saying it out loud and it sounds bad.
Yes. Actually, I'm going to ask this question now because I don't want another situation where I forget. When people edit, one of the most commonly heard pieces of, I'm just waiting for that whatever it is to go past. One of the most commonly heard pieces of advice is to read your writing out loud. Obviously, you don't need to do that for the final draft, but what other advice would you give to people who are editing?
Oh, editing, I would say find an editor that's not you. Because, I think we've all made mistakes of trying to edit our own work. So I would say find an editor, because after Beautiful, Frighting, and Silent came out, it was out for a couple months, and then I did find a really wonderful editor. Her name is Patty Ann, and she understood my voice, and she gave my book a nice re-edit. And
I got to ask you to re-record that, but I'm so sorry. It's gone now. From Patty Ann.
Yeah, okay. A wonderful editor named Patty Ann, who she really understood my voice, and she gave Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent a lovely re-edit. I reformatted the book. She was the editor on my new book, From Daylight to Madness. So I would say if you're editing your own work, try not to. Like, definitely write it, rewrite it again, but trust yourself and your own gift enough to give it to somebody else so they can see your mistakes.
Yes.
Because I can't see my own mistakes. And, we get very used to our own writing. So it's good to have somebody call you on it and be like, does this paragraph even need to be here?
Yes.
What is this?
Yes. It's funny, but very, very similar. I can't afford the editor that I want, so I'd rather not have one. I personally wrote my first ever book in 10 weeks, ironically ending it on the day it starts.
I love that.
Yeah, and I'll tell you that story another time. I don't want to bore you, but it was an amazing story. I still love that story. Is it perfect? No. Is it a good book? Is the bones of it good? Yes, very much so. It's one of my favourites. As for Dana of the Moonbeams, you've got to read that. Anyway. Does writing energize or exhaust you?
It does both. It really does both. It depends on what exactly I'm writing that day. I'm very energized by the process of it. But as we kind of talked about before, about getting into the character and feeling the emotions, when I'm writing kind of heavy material, when my characters are kind of emotionally going through the ringer, that takes something out of me. So yeah. I could write 1,000 words and then have to sleep for a few hours. Or if I have a really, really productive few days and writing a lot of heavy emotions, I need to take like brain rest for a couple days afterwards, because I do get exhausted. Emotionally, I get exhausted.
Yeah.
From it. Which it sounds so silly, but again, the same thing happened when I was doing theater. I would be very, very energized, but there are certain characters that take a toll on you.
Definitely. I totally get that. Your book is, am I correct in thinking your book is self-published?
It, so we're going to have to cut this part.
Okay. I can cut the question.
Yeah, cut the question only because I was published with a publisher, but then I got out of my agreement. But I had to sign a non-disclosure agreement, so I can't talk about it.
That's okay. I will cut the question. I've got a million more anyway.
Okay. I was like, oh, that's a tricky one. I can't legally
I'm
talk
really
about.
Sorry. I usually ask if there's any questions that you don't want to ask.
You know, and what's so funny is you're one of my first interviews I've done since I left the publisher and went to, and then republished on my own. So I, in my head, I thought, make sure to tell them not to ask.
Yeah. And then I asked.
And I forgot. And I forgot.
I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. So strike that one from the record.
Not a problem. Not a problem. That gives us quite a time for a couple more. Excuse me. I apologise for that. If you could tell your younger self anything, what would it be? What advice would you give your younger self?
Don't throw away the stories you wrote when you were in 7th grade. Don't throw, because again, like some of those, and I was so young, but I think some of the things I wrote in my early years of writing had really good bones. Bad meat on top of it, but really good bones. So specifically, I tried to write a murder mystery novel when I was like 13 or 14. And I still think about the plot to that. And I think I should, as an adult, revisit that and write that story. So, but it would have been helpful to have all of my old journals. Yeah. So I would say, don't throw your journals away, Jennifer.
Now, we've just been talking, and we are both very psychic. This is just a morbid curiosity question, really. But as a writer, what would you choose as your mascot, your avatar, your spirit animal? What would it be?
I'm always torn between two. If we're talking actual animals, it would either be a raven or a red fox.
Okay, why those?
The red fox, I've always had just a very, I've been very drawn to them my whole life. And I think they're cunning and smart, but incredibly delightful and playful when they want to be.
Yeah.
So I love the fox. Yeah. A raven, I think, is so fiercely intelligent, and they have such a memory. I think. Ooh. Hello? Oh, there you are. Sorry, I think my headphones came out. So the raven, just very smart, and they don't forget things, and they plot.
Yeah.
So if you never piss off a raven, because it will come back with its friends and and wreak havoc on you. This happened in my neighborhood. This is how I know this.
I'll tell you a funny story. Which I've cut out because he'd lynch me if I knew. If he knew, I'd tell you this. But I was with a partner, and he's a bit. Well, he doesn't like buying things. He's very good with money, if I can put it that way. He took a flask and he said, "We'll sit outside." Now, it was freezing cold. I don't do well in the cold. So I said, "Do we have to sit outside?" He said, "Yeah." Because, of course, he wanted to drink the coffee. He brought the flask. Not the first time he's embarrassed me. Anyway, we sat there and this raven flies onto the tree. and then poops in the coffee just as he's about to drink.
See?
That was so funny.
A couple of years ago, you can cut this story too. This raven was in our neighborhood, and it was trash day, and the ravens are so big it was able to take the lid off a trash can and was eating some of the trash, one of my neighbor's trash.
Oh my God.
My neighbor came out and really beeped the car horn and scared the bird away. The next morning, there were 3 ravens just sitting in the street, cawing and cawing from about 3:30 in the morning until 8:30 in the morning, for hours, these giant birds. And then the next day there were even more of them. And this went on for months before they probably got bored and went away. And I knew it was because they were pissed at my neighbor. Oh, you scared me away. Yeah. So a few months ago, there was another raven, and Roman and I saw it. Roman is my fiance, and he was sitting on our neighbor's garbage can, and I was like, we just drove by it really, really slow, and I'm like, don't make him mad. Just let him throw the trash all over the ground. Somebody will pick it up. We don't need another incident of the ravens.
Oh, I love stories like that. When I have to say, you're going back to your book. This is the last question before the station identification. When you write, most of your characters are male. Do you find it difficult to write from a male point of view because you're a female, or do you find it quite relatively easy? And what's the most difficult thing about writing from the opposite sex?
Yeah, I've been asked this question before, and I actually thought it was a little bit easier, I think, because maybe it wasn't because they were men that it was easier, but because the emotions of those characters were something I could latch on to more.
Yes.
So I don't really think, I guess I've not really thought about it as a male or a female thing per se, but the male characters in Beautiful, Frighting, and Silent, I understood them more.
Yes.
I understood because their emotions were more something I could tap into.
Yes.
I guess. And even in my new book, From Daylight to Madness is very female oriented. But then the follow-up to that is about her male character in that book. So yeah, once again, I found myself I'm writing from a man's point of view again. But yeah, I guess I didn't think about it. It just happened. Because I don't think I'm writing a specific male point of view. We'll say with Adam from Beautiful, Frighting, and Silent.
He was who I was thinking of, actually.
Yeah, he was just very much dealing with emotions. And I never thought of it as he's dealing with his male emotions. He was just dealing with emotions. And it could have been a man or a woman feeling those things.
Yes. Actually,
I guess. Oops. I was going to say, I guess I liked that I liked writing about these emotions from a male point of view, because I think everybody expects the female to be the more emotional. That's kind of, a typical thing. So I liked Adam's deep sensitivity at times.
Yeah.
So
it's strange that you and Alison both wrote about someone called Adam.
Yeah, I know. That's weird, huh?
Yeah. The same thing happened, kind of, with me and a character. The book I've written for you to read is called Vincent, or it's now called Chance, but the original name was Vincent. Someone I know was also writing with a character called Vincent, and he was a vampire, so really strange.
Huh?
So,
and when I read Alison's book, I was just like, oh my gosh, it's about an Adam.
Have you ever seen The Chase over here? like on YouTube.
Okay.
Have you ever seen a video of a game show called The Chase?
No.
Well,
no.
If you go on YouTube, there's a guy called The Beast on it. He's called Mark. His real name is Mark Labatt, and he's a man mountain. He's absolutely huge. He's actually a lovely, lovely guy. He's a math teacher. And I love it when he goes so fast he gets his math questions wrong. I think how bad he is as a teacher. But he's the one, although he's nothing like she describes, I can actually see him in the part, which is weird if they did a film of it. I'm glad I'm taking that out because we've got oh shit, what was that? Sorry. I just knocked something flying. Okay. Just knocked something flying. Anyway, sorry. One more question before we go to the break. What did you edit out of this book?
Oh, I had a couple things. I had a flashback sequence about Anthony, who is the murderer. Mm-hmm. Of all of this, the now elderly murderer. I had a flashback sequence about him and his mother that went on for a long time. It was a whole chapter. And I took that out because I thought eventually I would probably like to explore that as like a short story in the future. And it didn't need specifically to be in Beautiful, Frighting, and Silent. I preferred having a little bit of Anthony's past be more vague, and it left people questioning. So I always allude to like his mother's room and it being like a creepy, terrible place. Yeah. So I like that when I've done book clubs, people always say, "What was going on with that room?" And I'm like, "Well, you'll have to read my short story when it comes out."
Yeah, exactly.
So I took that out, and then I had a chapter that was entirely written from the little boy, Benny Boy's point of view. Yeah. And again, I didn't think I was doing a very good job at writing from a 4-year-old's point of view. So I should have taken that out, and I'm glad I did. And again, maybe that might be a story someday, maybe not, I'm not sure. But those are the two big things I took out. Everything else was more just like adding in some shading, some extra character backstory here and there.
Yeah. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Just before we go to the, I promise we will go to the final break. Oh, don't tell me. They better not. I sound like about the puppy. She's a noisy little bugger. Do you like dogs? Do you like dogs?
Do I like
dogs?
Dogs?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, very much.
I'll send you a picture of Bella. So cheeky, so naughty. A squirrel fell out of the tree before, and she tried to chase it up the tree.
Oh gosh,
so typical of her.
Yeah, I love dogs. I have a dog, and he's. I shouldn't talk about him too much, or else he'll start barking right outside my door.
Is that Lord Tubby?
It is Lord Tubby.
Yeah, I wish I could meet him one day. He's gorgeous. I love when he's barking and telling you off.
Oh my God, he does that all day.
Does he? Oh my God. Anyway, that's not the question. What I was going to ask you, I know from my own point of view, when I'm editing a book, it's very difficult to take out your favourite scenes. How do you handle that? Do you get offended by having to take things out, or?
I don't, because I think it'll make the story stronger.
Yeah.
And, and I guess now in the days of, like, we have computers, so nothing's ever really gone. I've just, copy and pasted it into a different file. So it's still there. I could still, use it. And sometimes I think, and again, I'm going to go back to that whole theater thing, when you're developing a character as an actor, most of the work you do is not on stage. Most of it is in your brain and developing a history for a character that nobody will ever see.
Yeah.
You perform and nobody knows the hours and the months of work you've put into developing who that character is.
Yeah.
So cutting something out of a book to me it isn't a big deal. It was just me as a writer doing the work I needed to get my character to be fully developed. So It's not wasted time or wasted work. It was just work that was in the long run meant to be private.
Yeah. It's funny because I'm having this conversation a lot at the moment, and what I find, I say to people, look, it's not, as you've said yourself, you can copy and paste it into another file. If there's a scene for me, I can only speak for myself, that I'm thinking, oh my God, I really want this piece, and it's not making the book any stronger. There's a couple of classic moments in this book that I'm writing at the moment, and I know that they shouldn't be there. They were sort of me going down memory lane. One thing triggered a memory which caused me to write it. So I had to have two things that I personally do. One is I copy and paste it into a deleted scenes folder. And I also keep my own version in the font I like, and in the the version that I like of the book, and then I'll send the editor what they need, the publisher what they need.
Yeah.
That's how I do. To me, it's no big deal. Sometimes
No.
I'm sad to cut something. Actually, I will give some advice to anyone listening now who's listening to this and thinking, yeah, I want to cut something out. Please copy and paste it into a document, or don't work on your original document. I lost a critical scene. It was only a short scene, but it flowed in that original scene. I can't get it to flow the same way, but I had to have the characters do something, and I couldn't. There's no way for them to understand where the star sign, the constellation of Sagittarius was. So I would say, please keep your documents. It's a horrible feeling. We're going to go for a quick station identification, and then we're going to give Jennifer one final chance to publicise this book. So be back soon. Stay tuned, guys. Good time in the door slammed. I just better to actually say it and give it a minute or so that I can fit that station identification in, So.
Oh, it's perfect.
Okay, welcome back to the final part, sadly, of the Writer's Stop. My name is Elizabeth James. I've been your host for the last hour. We've got 15 minutes of the show left, and get your final fix of the fabulous Jennifer Ann Gordon. Jennifer, you've been a fabulous guest. We've already said you will be a returning guest. I'm already looking forward to that.
I would love that, Elizabeth. Thank you.
I have actually got so many questions. It's ridiculous. And I love it when that happens. Now, one thing I didn't do with Alison, which I said was a mistake learned, I want you to read another short segment of the book so that you can leave the viewers listen. You can leave the read the you can leave. Try it again. So I want you to have a short segment so that you can leave the listeners with something to whet their appetite and make them go out and buy this fabulous book, Beautiful, Frightening and Silent.
Okay. Let me see here. So this is from probably about 3/4 of the way through the book. Again, it was kind of tricky for me to find things that didn't have spoilers in it.
Yes.
But
I haven't given any spoilers. I said I've not given any spoilers, have I?
No, we've been very good. We've been very, very good. Because there are a few, as you know, there's a few major twists that happen in the book that So this is about 3/4 of the way through. This is from Anthony's perspective. And again, listeners, so Anthony is 82 years old and he murdered somebody. He murdered the woman he loves 60 years ago. So this is from an Anthony chapter. Though it is only the latter half of the middle of November, the sun sets early on this day. The storm rolls in like soldiers in a battle. They fill the melancholy sky with letters to loved ones that will never be sent. This battle is one that is doomed on all sides. Could there possibly be any survivors from a battle so hard fought? Anthony knows better than to fight it. He gives in and he lets the dark come. The clouds grow heavy with guilt, broken promises, and half-remembered dreams. It washes over this part of the island, blanketing it in a thick fog. He looks outside and realizes that if fear had a singular look, it would look like this sky during the last ebbing days of his life. It is the manic gray light of a New England sky as it finally gives itself over to darkness. If there really are things in this house, his house, things that are dead, that walk alone in the dark, he can't feel them now. They too must have to eventually sleep. They are hunkered down waiting for the storm as it makes its slow crawl from under the bed, anxious to reach its hand up and touch your bare skin as you drift off to sleep. The surrounding air has a hollowness. The surrounding air has a holiness. The wind outside makes a sound like ice singing on a frozen pond as the first frozen crystal shards begin to fall from the sky. The pitter-patter against the house sounds like a child running wild after too much sugar. He wonders where the dead ones go when they suddenly grow quiet. He finds their absence unsettling. He scans the floor for small saltwater puddles, and he reaches through the air for cobwebs made of long, sinewy red hair. He strains his ears for the incessant whispering in his mother's room, and now he waits to hear a toy fire truck making its rounds through the upstairs bedrooms. There is nothing, only the heaviness of silence as he sits quietly. He strains his ears to hear what's happening underneath the sound of wind and ice. And he wonders if things are waking up under the stained sheets in the room that was once his mother's and his father's, lest he ever forget. It is at that moment that he hears it, a slow, bottomless gurgle like a sink with a clog deep in its pipes, the kind that costs thousands to be fixed, and then there's nothing ever quite right after that. He coughs, and he feels like the insides of his chest explode. He has the irrational fear that he's been shot. He coughs again, and it leads to a fit that is both violent and exhausting. He bloodies the old hanky he keeps in his pocket, as well as 2 tissues. Anthony always buys the cheapest kind of tissues, so they're thin and easily overwhelmed. The blood leaks onto his hands, and it makes him woozy to look at it. He thinks he knows where the dead ones go when they're quiet. They go inside of him. They burrow down deep, and they take the shape of holes in his lungs and small cancerous nodules. The growths, they look like tiny fists that grasp, punch, and claw for purchase. He feels them there now, as the rot that was born inside of him when he was young and broke that teacup finally comes of age. This rot is grown now, and he's finally reached his truest form.
Wow. I was actually totally hooked by that. You can tell that you've got a background in theatre. You really can. Where did you get the title? Just very briefly, Beautiful, Frighting and Silent.
Oh, it's actually a line from a poem that I had written about the ghost.
I see. Yeah.
So, and then oddly enough, that line was cut from the poem when I used it in the book, but I ended up making, Adam said it. Adam used the words when he was describing the ghost.
Yeah, it's an amazing book. And one question before I come to the final question. If you had to say 3 books that every writer must have on their bookshelf, what would they be?
Oh my gosh.
I did ask you about this one.
So, I mean, that any writer, so all writers, all genres.
Yeah.
I would say the complete works of William Shakespeare is a must-have. I would say, I'm trying to be as kind of broad as possible so that things would appeal to everybody. So, a thesaurus.
Yeah.
And what would appeal to everybody? I guess I would probably say the Great Gatsby, because I think even if you don't like Fitzgerald and don't like the 1920s or anything like that, his prose is some of the most beautiful that's been written.
Yeah.
So, and he's contemporary enough. So we've got our Shakespeare, Thesaurus, and the Great Gatsby.
That's fantastic.
I would go with those 3.
Well, out of curiosity, what is your favourite Shakespeare play?
Othello.
All right. Mine's Midsummer Night's Dream.
Oh, yeah. You know, I love all Shakespeare. I'm drawn to the tragedies more than the comedies.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say Othello. I love all the characters. Iago is one of the greatest villains ever written. So
that's cool. Okay, so we now know we're coming to the final part of the show. Well, we're in the final part of the show, coming to the end of the show. Jennifer, can you tell us you can promote whatever you like for the next few minutes?
Oh, okay. So I have a new book being released on August 20th. I'm not sure when this show is going to air. So my book might...
Oh, sorry, I'll answer that. I'll answer that. It should be within the next week.
Okay. So From Daylight to Madness should be out. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, anywhere books are sold online. And From Daylight to Madness is a Victorian Gothic novel. And again, it takes place on Dagger Island. It's about a woman named Isabel who gives birth to a baby boy who passes away. And because it's Victorian times and she's not grieving in the way that her family thinks she should be grieving. Mm-hmm. So she's not sad enough sometimes and she's too sad other times. They plot to send her away to, as they call it, a summer hotel. But it's not really just a hotel. It's a place that she's being sent to get her out of their hair. Yeah. Because the truth of the matter is it's Victorian era and she's now a woman who has become a burden because she can no longer have children, and she's an embarrassment because she cries when she's not supposed to cry. Mm. So it is a story about her and her experience and the people she meets on Dagger Island at this hotel. And it's very lyrical. It's very poetic. It's part 1 of a 2-part series. So yeah, I hope people check it out. It's a little less horror than it's a little less horror than Beautiful, Frighting, and Silent. There's no ghosts per se. It's more akin to, I would say, like a Jane Eyre. Yes. Or a little bit of Wuthering Heights.
Maybe. Yeah.
But mixed with the knowledge we have now about mental illness and about the fact that women, especially in the mentally ill, were treated very horribly for a long time. So this is a story about one woman's experience.
Yeah, that's fun.
Where she just wishes she can be treated like a person, and she's not. So
yeah. She's a woman.
And it takes place on a creepy island. She's a woman. Yeah. And so it takes place in an old hotel with strange goings on and noises in the attic and characters who aren't necessarily what they seem.
Yeah. Do you know what made me put me in mind of? It was the School for Peculiar Children.
Oh yes. So it's funny that you say that. I haven't seen the movie, but I've read the books.
Yeah.
But the movie stars one of my favorite actresses, Ava Green. And Ava Green is the person I picture in my head that plays my character, Isabel.
Oh.
So that's very interesting that you said that. So.
Yeah. Jennifer Ann Gordon, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. You've been a brilliant guest. Thank you very much. I can't wait to speak to you next time.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Thank you. I thought that went really well. I mean, I don't know. You probably
get off
and say, I'm going to say, you'll probably get off and say, oh my God, what the hell did you put me forward for?
No, it was wonderful.
I think I tried to go for the more unusual questions. Hang on. You can't hear me. Yeah, I try to go for the more unusual questions.
I love that. Yeah. I love it. It's always good to not